Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to No K, I've Had Enough podcast. I'm joined once again for part 2 on our pro-life segment. I'm joined with James G. Spitznagel and Mr. Ben Nice. Ice. I knew I was going to mess that up. Anyway, it's life, so I don't care. Ben, what's coming up on the pro-life front with legal issues and the whole front of it?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to state legislature right now because I don't follow the national stuff quite as much, and there is, they're a mess. I don't have much control and influence over that. But right now, we saw the first day of the Indiana legislative session on January 9th. And on January 9th, Senator Mike Young of District 35 introduced a bill, Senate Bill 217. And Senate Bill 217 is Students for Life Action sponsored legislation to end the practice of chemical abortion in Indiana. So we already have in Indiana, except for some exceptions, abortion is pretty much, you can't really get it, from conception. Now, why are we working to end chemical abortion and along this side? It's because chemical abortion is so incredibly dangerous. So when I say chemical abortion, I'm talking about the 2 pills, the abortion drugs, mifepristone and misoprostol, right? A woman takes mifepristone and through 24 to 48 hours, her baby is starved of the hormone progesterone. And because there's no progesterone going into that or into through the system, the woman's body doesn't know how to feed the baby. It doesn't know that she's pregnant at all, and so there's no nutrients getting to the baby, and the baby starves. And the next drug that's taken is not strictly an abortion drug, but it's just used all the time to, induce labor. And so she takes these pills at home. And she's having this abortion at home. There's an extremely high complication rate for her. And there is not only just, this high complication rate, it's 8 times higher for her, the risk of complication than any other form of abortion. But, of course, it's still ending the life of an innocent child. There's also a lot of concerns because this is up more than 60% of all abortions nationwide. At least in the states that report, which by the way are all the conservative states. Yeah, the chemical.
Or 60% more than...
That's right. Yeah.
I never knew that.
It's 60% of all abortions.
Oh,
or 64%.
It's becoming more and more.
And
more prevalent.
And that's only the states that are reporting. And so what are the states that aren't reporting? Well, it's the states that likely have the most chemical abortions. It's New Mexico, it's New York, it's California, it's Michigan. It's these states. Where people are just getting it like candy. This is terrible. If she has an ectopic pregnancy, she gets this. She hasn't had an ultrasound, which in states like California and New Mexico, you don't have to. You don't have to have an ultrasound first. And so she goes in there, and if she has an ectopic pregnancy, the chemical abortion procedure is going to fail. And one of 2 things is going to happen. Either A, the baby's not going to die, and it's going to keep growing, and the fallopian tube is going to rupture. That's absolutely terrible. The life of the mother is extremely at risk there. The second thing that could happen is the baby did die, but now it's stuck in the fallopian tubes because there's not muscles in the fallopian tube that are powerful enough to expel the child. And, well, now she's going into sepsis. She has infections because she has a baby left inside of her. So we're trying to end this in Indiana, this practice of chemical abortion. Especially because the reasons that people can get abortion in Indiana is for the tragic situation of a sexual assault. And, just taking a moment to speak to this, why in the pro-life movement do we say, oh, you have had this terrible thing happen to you, and you still shouldn't be having an abortion. It comes to the scenario of realizing what we're dealing with, and we're dealing with an innocent child. It's wrong for us to say ever of a born child, imagine, maybe we think about a scenario of this woman, she's had this terrible thing happen to her, and it's got to be hard, like, just to imagine what she might be going through, the trauma that she's experiencing, the grief, what she might be dealing with from this sexual assault. I could never imagine just what she's going through. It's terrible. And whoever did this to her, of course, we need to find them and make sure they're prosecuted to the extent of the law. Now, the Guttmacher Institute reports that about half, it might be a little bit more, of women who are sexually assaulted and conceive a child actually decide to keep their baby. Now, whether they give that baby to an adoption center after it's born or whatever, I don't know exactly. Some of them probably do raise their child. I know some women that have. I know some women that have given their baby to the adoption center or other things like that. But, we're speaking about this child, and this isn't a rape baby. This is a human person. And, just based off of our circumstance of conception, how we were conceived, shouldn't change our value. It doesn't mean that we are less valuable because we were not conceived in love, or we're more valuable because we were conceived in love. We're not given points on our birth certificate. And so, recognizing, like, this is the time when abortion, pretty much, there's also some health or life of the mother things, which maybe we can talk about a little bit, but that's pretty much the only time when women are supposed to be able to get abortions in Indiana. And so she's had this terrible trauma on top of her, and we're going to give her another trauma by giving her an abortion in her home. And she's going to, after we talk about what Abby Johnson went through, after hours of agonizing pain, she has having blood clots that have been reported to be the size of tennis balls at sometimes for hours. And, there's times, especially depending on her gestational age, she could, now in Indiana, I want to say she shouldn't be receiving the abortion drug after 6 weeks, but of course it's possible, and we have reports of illegal abortions happening after that, illegal chemical abortions specifically. And, of course, this is a drug that right now in the United States you can have mailed in from overseas. So, she's receiving these drugs, and she is very easily able to, just look down in the toilet and see her child in there. Are we really going to say under state law that we want her to go through more trauma? We want her to go through more trauma by going through all of that? We're going to add this terrible, 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 atrocious thing that happened to her when she was assaulted. We're going to add another trauma on top of that. Why don't we instead work to support and love her? And, I think we can all agree, there's nothing we can do to undo what happened on that night. And all we can do is love and support her and provide medical professionals, therapists, love and support, whatever she needs, whatever the medical professionals say she needs, but abortion isn't one of them. And chemical abortion especially is going to make that worse.
Well, something you brought up too, which I think a lot of people overlook, is the adoption avenue if they don't want to have a child.
Right, and look at the adoption agency. People say, oh, it's broken, it needs fixed, to a certain extent. Yes, it does. There's things that aren't perfect about it. And especially the foster care system, which is very different than adoption. Right. But we look at adoption specifically, newborn adoption. Every newborn almost is adopted. There's wait lists of millions of people who want newborn babies because they're having trouble conceiving themselves.
And that's totally different from foster care.
Yeah, of course, it's totally different. And foster care is, the end goal is to reunite the child with its original parents. Adoption is, the child is no longer able to, or the parents don't want to keep the child, or whatever. Maybe they're just not able to for whatever reason. And so they, out of love and compassion for their child, say, I'd like to make sure that you're with a loving and caring home. And so they, I'm sure that's a hard decision for parents to make, but, that's the difference is there. But anyways, this legislation, would end this practice of chemical abortion. It would fix some of the loopholes that we saw in the previous. It was titled Senate Bill 1 before it became a law, and there's some loopholes in there. With, for example, we were talking about the tragic situation of sexual assault. Well, anybody could just go in there and say they need an abortion, and they're not legally allowed to ask why. They don't have to. Maybe she was sexually assaulted, but you're not allowed to find out why. So now we're saying, well, there should be an affidavit signed saying that this is what happened to you. And honestly, that's what we need. If a woman was sexually assaulted and she needs an abortion, we need to find whatever person made this terrible life decision. We need to make sure they're not going to do this to anyone else. And we need to protect other women. And how can we protect other women if we're not having police reports, we're not having things filed? Because this person could go do it to someone else. It's terrible. And so we want to prevent that from happening. This would also help the tragic situation we've seen. Live Action has these videos where they have people posing as pimps who come in, and these are situations when the same guy brings the same girl for an abortion 9 times and there's no questions asked. Really? This girl's 17, 18 years old. You're not asking questions about that? And oh well, she was sexually assaulted. Well, it's the same guy bringing her in 9 times. You're not, So we're trying to prevent some of that stuff happening too with this legislation. That's really the big thing happening. So
they don't even ask the guy, oh, this 8th or 9th time you've been in here.
Well, there's videos. Live Action has unedited videos of this going through. They had undercover reporters and just talking about this, and they were very explicit, like, look, like, she's had a lot of abortions before, and, we just want something quick, so, and there's even a video I watched, when can she have sex again? It's like, jeez. Oh my gosh. So you're selling off this girl, or you're using her yourself, like, this is ridiculous. It's terrible, and people don't deserve to be treated that way. And so that's what the pro-life movement is, a huge thing of my conversion is realizing this isn't compassion, this isn't love, this isn't support. This is an abomination to women, this is an abomination to our society, and we need to do better.